Hey there. So I know my cousin Scott is already here. So hi, Scott. Yeah, I hope things go well up north too. That's part of the reason why I'm gearing up today. So I realized after looking at how tarnished the strings are becoming that I need to restring my PRS Angelus today. So I'm going to take some time doing that. But I figured we might as well hang out together. So if you're working from home and you're at a terminal or you're having a mental health day or whatever reason, I'm happy to hang out. So if you have any questions, just hit those up in the chat. Oh, hey Barbara, nice to see you. So if you have any questions about upcoming stuff or what I'm doing, go ahead and post that in the chat. Yeah, I'm just here to hang out. So mostly I'm going to be focused on this work, but I'm going to try and pay attention to what's going on in the comments. So if it takes me a minute to get to you, sorry for that, but I'm going to do my best to stay on top of everything. So as some of you might know, I am traveling north to Oswego, New York, to the Sterling Renaissance Festival this weekend to once again play with my friends in Volgamut. And I'm really excited about this. We've talked about a couple of things since then. I've worked on a couple of songs that Michael and I played at Sherwood back in April and haven't really played a lot since. So I'm really excited to hear how that's going to go with the rest of the crew. So I don't know what the plan is for this weekend. I know that there are some special things that are planned to happen. Michael didn't say anything about the specifics Thursday night, and based on what I know, I'm not going to say anything either. But it should be a really cool weekend. And he did hint when he and I last spoke on the phone that he might actually record some of it. So hopefully that'll be showing up on Volgamut Live in the next few weeks. Maybe as early as next Thursday. So I'm going to start by relaxing all the strings slightly to give the neck a little bit of time to get used to a little less tension. And I actually find this is actually pretty meditative. I said something about this last week when I restrung my Stingray bass. There's just something centering and calming about instrument maintenance for me. So, especially around guitars. So I actually like doing setups and restringing and polishing and all that. So sometimes my friends will ask me to do that for them because they don't like it. But this is for me. I usually try and restring the guitars that I'm playing a lot every month, and I'm pretty sure I didn't do that with the Angelus lately. So this needs a thorough cleaning, which is why I'm completely removing the strings. That's a good question, Scott. I think it's probably not terrible. Like when I first learned how to restring a guitar, I would just take a wire cutters and just cut them because it was easier to get into the bridge pins that way. I talked to a couple of luthiers and they think it's probably better to do it more gradually. I used to do a lot of work with museums and in the fine art sector, and there was a lot of careful thought that went into gradually opening crates that held delicate or expensive paintings. Yeah, you're right. Tightening too much is terrible, Barbara. It's a great way to break your strings. And there are some ways that you can be a little bit more careful around that. So I'll be talking about that when I get to the actual reinstalling new strings part of the program. But you're absolutely right. It's really easy to break, especially the higher strings, like the lower gauge ones this way on the fretboard. So I'm pretty glad in some ways that I play on steel strings and necks that can handle higher tension. Some of you who have watched Volgamut live or have seen Volgamut play in an actual live setting maybe have heard Michael talk about how susceptible his VL is to the elements because it is low tension and it has natural gut strings. So yeah, I mean, when we were the one day that it rained at Sherwood when I was there, the VL did not come out that day, and Michael pretty much played a recorder all day, which actually was pretty cool. We played that weekend. One of our stages was the Greenwood stage, which is kind of over in a corner on the gate side, like where everybody comes in and leaves at the end of the day. You're absolutely right about that, Barbara. The thinner the string, the more easily it breaks. So over at the Greenwood, it's a cool stage. It's kind of in a neat little glade, and it's a little on the big side for two people playing quiet sets, but I quite like the setting. Anyway, it doesn't have any kind of covering, so we ended up playing at the leather booth right next door, and they were super accommodating, and even tipped us, which was pretty rad. So it was kind of a pleasant experience. I personally enjoy the smell of leather, so leather and rain near a bunch of pine trees was all right. It was a pretty cool day, and Michael and I had fun playing despite the deluge, and we actually had a pretty decent audience despite the fact that it was raining fairly steadily at that point. So yeah, that was a good day. Anyway, Michael made that decision because his VL would have contracted severely and broken strings and maybe even the frets. So where I have steel frets or nickel frets on my guitar, Michael has like actual gut frets that are wrapped around the neck of his VL. And I think he did end up breaking a fret that weekend, if I remember right, which is not much fun. So, all right. So now that I have all the strings unwound, I'm going to move them off to the side, and this is actually my least favorite part, and part of the reason why I'm not a huge fan of bridge pins. So if somebody has suggestions how to make this easier, I am all for that. But so what I will usually do at this point is I'll take a guitar pick, because it's the inside of the bridge pins are pretty sharp, and this is a bridge pin puller, but it's kind of beat, so I'll see if that works first. Often it doesn't really seem to get very much purchase, and I end up doing the guitar pick trick, which looks like that's going to be the move today. So I will reach in and very carefully put a little bit of pressure from the bottom, from the inside of the guitar, and push up. And I'm stabilizing the pins so they don't go flying away into somewhere else in the house, which is never a lot of fun. And I'm just going to set those aside, as well as the old strings as I go. So anyway, hey, while I'm thinking about it, see, that's what can happen. While I'm thinking about it, hey Scott, how's Andrea doing? How is her surgery? Did that go well? Okay. All right, so strings are out. Pardon me a moment. allergies are doing their midsummer thing right now. All kinds of exciting new pollen in the air. So at this point, I recycle my strings. D'Addario, the string company that I usually use, has a really cool recycling program. So I'll bind up my strings and I set them aside for a while because they send you a label, you box everything up, and then they actually weigh the amount of metal that you recycle and give you credit. So one of the things that I think is really cool about that is they actually put the credit towards either your own account or a really cool program that gets music equipment and instruction for kids that aren't getting access, which I think is pretty rad. So I do that, and I feel a lot better about the fact that I'm both recycling strings and hopefully helping to at least augment a music program, which the arts, gasp and shock and surprise, are usually the first thing cut from education budgets. So, moving on to our next part of the program, this is a little thing called Gorgamite. It actually comes in a sheet, and it's kind of like a low abrasive, like high grit sandpaper kind of thing, but it also has some agents that help to polish frets and also the fretboard. So I'm gonna start with one that I used at the end of cleaning up my bass, and I'm gonna start from the base of the neck and start moving toward the headstock gradually. So this actually takes not as much time as I thought, but I'm exerting a good bit of pressure and trying to make sure that I'm getting the cloth in like every possible crevice. Something that isn't really an issue if you play on many parts of your neck and play frequently is the oils in your hand help to actually seal and protect the fretboard, which is pretty cool. But I don't play a whole lot of my fretboard since I'm usually just accompanying myself and playing chords, and often like more in like the mid position of the neck. I don't end up so high, so I'll always start polishing from the base of the fretboard. And I mean, maybe something that a lot of musicians don't talk about a lot is like when we're playing when it's hot, like we're sweating on the instrument. So like on one hand you want to wipe it down because that's kind of gross, but unless you take off the strings you really can't get into like every little part of the fretboard. So this is also kind of important to do from like a hygiene standpoint, I think. So this is a somewhat compulsive guide to changing strings. Anyway, the weather forecast the last time I saw for Sunday was going to be like high 70s and partly cloudy. So I'm pretty excited about that. Last time I was up in Sterling, I didn't think that it was too hot, but it poured most of the day before. And, there's a lot of dirt paths, so there was a lot of mud, which made navigating interesting at the bottom of the hill. For those of you who don't know, Sterling Ren Fair is in Oswego, New York, which is kind of hilly. And the main site for the Sterling Renaissance Festival is kind of on two tiers. So there's sort of like the top of the hill where the gate is and a lot of shops, and then there's sort of like two tracks that lead down the steep hill, and at the bottom of the hill there's more shops and stages. And Volgamut is playing on the Wildwood stage, which they're sharing with Clan Tinker. at least until this weekend. Clan Tinker is moving on. I am not actually sure where Clan Tinker is going next. But if you're anywhere near Oswego, New York, and you haven't seen them yet, I highly recommend it. Clan Tinker, I think, is definitely one of my favorite of all of the variety acts that I've seen. They very much embraced kind of like a modern vaudevillian sort of sensibility, and the show is just really beautiful. I mean, it's remarkable from like a skill perspective because they're all incredibly dexterous, and they do a great job of making very difficult things look easy, which is part of their showmanship. But I will say that their presentation is really quite beautiful overall, which just the level of thoughtfulness and care that goes into that I really enjoy. So I'm really excited to get a chance to see them perform again before they're, in another part of the country for a significant amount of time again. So anyway, you know what? This is probably going to make the house elves nuts Monday night, but I think that's probably a better spot for that logo today. Anyway, so as you can see, this didn't start off this dirty, so it gives you an idea how tarnished the frets can get over time. And it's sort of hard to see because the webcam that I use is all right, but it's not maybe that clear. But where the frets that I've already polished are like a nice nickel, and they're kind of a gleaming silver, they are slightly yellowed where I haven't yet polished them. So the nice thing about using the polishing compound in the Gorgamite is that it's actually helping to seal in and protect the wood of the fretboard. It actually feels kind of waxy. They changed their formula about 2 years ago, which I'm actually kind of happy about because it was sort of a wet formula before, and had kind of a strong solvent smell, which isn't the nicest thing to be this close to. So even in a fairly ventilated area, it felt like I might have been pushing my luck with what I was coming in contact with. So once I get a solid pass, I'm going to go back with a fresh sheet of Gorgamite and just pick up any of the lingering material that's still left on the fretboard. So I also like to do a pass over the bridge because it's the same type of wood as the fretboard, because that doesn't get nearly the same amount of physical contact with my skin as the fretboard. Depending upon how I'm playing, I sometimes rest the heel of my hand on the bridge, but that is not terribly frequent with the stuff that I'm usually playing, so it tends to be a little on the dry side, so it doesn't hurt to give that a little bit of love. So the final pass on the fretboard, and we're good to go. I like doing maintenance when I have at least a few days for the strings to settle in before actually getting into a performance. So this is, as much for getting ready for Sunday as it is about like Monday as well. But tomorrow I have rehearsal for Pennsylvania Ren Fair, which we had the Bacchanalian Company join us a few weeks ago, and I feel like all the work that the Blackfriar Company has done up to this point really shined out in the last few weeks. It's been really cool seeing all the work that we've put into our characters and our musical numbers and all of that, getting the Shire ready, the Shire of Mount Hope ready to accept visitors, and for its first festival day on August 21st. So that has been really cool. And it's been really cool seeing the crew that's been actually working on the buildings and the physical plant of the festival grounds. It's been seeing how that's been coming together, because there's some new stuff on the Shire grounds that hopefully you'll be pleasantly surprised when you see. So you can see that even though this fretboard's already been polished, there's still a good amount of dirt that I still picked up. And I'm going to switch to a microfiber cloth, and I'm going to give it a final rub down just to get up some of the excess material from the polishing compound, and kind of like a finish polish on the whole fretboard. So, for anybody who's interested, those of you who are patrons, this is exactly what your money goes toward. It goes toward like helping buy strings, helping buy other maintenance equipment. Yeah, it'll be great to see you at PARF this season, Scott, and Andrea, and anybody else from the family that makes it. I'm really excited about this season for a lot of reasons. One little bit of information is Lori, who some of you may know as House Elf 1. Lori actually bought season tickets, so she's going to be there quite a good bit this year, which I'm pretty excited about. So we might have some days where she shows up partway through the day and she's around for the end. So as rehearsals have gone on, I actually feel really good about a lot of the stuff that the directors are asking me to do this season. So I'm getting a chance to work with a lot of people that I'm just really excited about the level of commitment and the level of care. Oh, hey, Carlos. Helping you buy beer? Yeah, sure. That shouldn't be a problem. There's certainly plenty of places to do it, and I actually legitimately enjoy a lot of the beers that they make at Mount Hope. Contractually, I'm not supposed to drink during a festival day, which I think makes sense. But I would recommend the Hefeweizen. That's really good. I think their Pils is decent. And they make a really good stout, Blackwater, which I think is probably my favorite thing that they make. But I think last year you could only get Blackwater at, I think, 2 of the bars or 3 of the bars. There's like 6, and there might be more this year. So, yeah. So I recommend Blackwater if you like stouts. So this is the point of the program where we start with the new strings. So these are D'Addarios, and they should be lights. So I quite like D'Addario lights for the acoustic, and they're kind of wound up in pairs. So I'm going to go from my low E string first. For those of you who don't know, I pretty much use standard tuning all the time. I don't really have a problem with alternative tunings. I think at an early point when I started playing, I just decided that I wanted to do as much as possible with standard. Part of that is if you start getting into some of the drop tunings, you need to do a lot with like the scale of your neck, and also your intonation can get a little bit weird. And with an acoustic, you don't really want to mess with that too much, because unlike an electric guitar, you don't really have a lot of ways to like move your intonation around. So I just decided that standard just made a lot more sense. Oh, yeah, sorry your internet was down. Did you guys have storms or something, or was it just bad luck? We were sorry to miss you too, Carlos. It was kind of I don't know, Monday was kind of a low-key night, which I guess, given what my weekend was like, I didn't mind. I drove to Richmond area to help have a memorial for my Uncle Craig. One of the strange things about this season is just having to postpone everything. And we postponed his memorial for fairly long, hoping that maybe things would clear up, and I think made the decision that we were going to risk it anyway, since it was going to be outside. So I was still kind of in a weird mood from that. So as I'm doing this, I'm putting a little bit of a bend on the opposite side of the machine head, and I'm not trying to do like I'm not trying to wind up the whole string. I'm leaving a little bit of extra space so it winds, but after I pull the kink, I'm putting a little bit of tension, and I'm slightly pulling from like the bridge end of the strings as I tighten it. So partly what I'm doing is I'm keeping the string seated in the nut. So there's 6 grooves in the nut, and I'm trying to keep it kind of in there. I'm also trying to guide the wind so that I get everything to wind cleanly around the machine head. So these little guys, and I'm keeping some fingers between the string and the fretboard. And Barbara, you asked a little earlier about string breakage. So it's one of the ways that I insulate myself from over tightening too soon. So if I have fingers in between the string and the fretboard, there's only like so far that I can go, and I'm not trying at this point to like tune the guitar. I'm just trying to get the strings on with like just enough tension. So if you've tuned in from the beginning, you know that I gradually started to let off some of the pressure. So now I'm gradually putting some tension back into the neck as I put tension through the strings. So I'm going string by string and kind of gradually. So tuning is like a whole other enterprise. So the other thing that I'm doing is I'm actually not trying to shove the bridge pins in as tightly as I possibly can either. I'm not exactly certain why bridge pins are still a thing. There are a couple of companies that actually run the strings through the bridge, sort of more like an electric guitar. That's one of the design things that I like about Breedlove guitars. But most companies still use bridge pins, And bridge pins, if you're not careful, you can actually put them in so hard that you damage the bridge and it'll start to crack. So it's just like, well, it's just like putting fasteners in anything. Like if you're working with metal or wood or any other material, you're actually not trying to make everything like as tight as possible. You want it to have just enough tension that it holds and it does its job, but not so far that you strip anything or like put too much pressure on something and potentially cause damage. So on to the G string. So I'm actually going to leave a little bit more extra on the higher strings because they're more narrow. You can actually wind them around the machine head a lot more, whereas the gauges are so heavy on like the lower side, like the E, the A, and the D string, that you're kind of limited to how much you can wind them. But the G, the B, and the high E, they're so light gauge. You can wind them quite a bit before you run out of space. So this isn't as true with the G, but with the B and the E string, they're so thin that it's actually a good thing to run them a couple of times around. It helps to anchor them in place. So that's good. Something that I didn't talk about, normally when the strings are off, I'll make sure that all the machine bolts are tight, but they seemed fine, so I didn't do that, and I didn't make a big show of checking. So anyway, so Monday night, I'm planning on doing the usual live stream, even though I myself will be wandering this weekend. The show will be back in the studio with House Elf 1 at the controls. So we can talk a little about maybe what that could look like. I have a bit of a set list planned. So something that I've been dealing with over the last year and a half is a pretty big postponement to getting in the studio and like seriously recording the next Subaltern project record. So I've also done something that I normally don't do, which is get a chance to play stuff out live a whole lot before recording it. So like most of A Vision in Exile was written before anybody heard anything from it. And y'all have been hearing, well, most of the new album pretty frequently. Like Burning Day and Dementia are both going to be on the new album when that finally happens. But it's been interesting having that time because I get to hear kind of how people think about stuff, or there are certain songs that I wrote on an electric guitar, and so I was thinking in terms of like layering like a lot of like kind of heavily affected guitars. And while it's possible to play that on acoustic, that's not, I don't know, there's a couple songs that I've been kind of like frustrated with because they're not enough yet. Like they're not done yet that way. So I've been working on changing some arrangements around, and that's been really cool because I think it's going to end up making the songs a lot better even on electric. So like, I don't know, I think most of you have probably heard Leviathan, which like I should probably post the demo that I made on Patreon, For those of you who don't know, I have a Patreon page. It's really cool. I've got a ton of exclusive stuff on there. I actually mastered and mixed a bunch of the Live from the Wandering Bard episodes that are for patrons only. I've got all the video clips that I can't rebroadcast because they contain covers, so like that's kind of where those clips go. Or like completely uncut VOD from Monday nights, as well as a few demos. So the working demo for Deliver Us is up, which I'm kind of surprised. Like, that song is sort of the rare occasion where, like, for this album anyway, it's worked more or less the way that I want it to. So Deliver Us is going to be up and already have anyway, that's pretty much in the arrangement that it's supposed to, but Leviathan is not. So I'm going to put the demo of its current state up if I haven't already, because I forget. I'll put the new demo for Leviathan up on the Patreon page, and if you want to check that out, I will put that link up now. Do I have it? Oh no. Yes, I do. Okay. This is what happens when the house elves leave me alone. I don't work as quickly. So, here we go. There is that link. Anyway, Patreon's real cool. Scott, thank you for you at Andrea supporting me. They have been patrons for almost as long as I've had the page, and I'm super grateful for that, because that, as well as the tips, that's how I can afford to do all this stuff, which is so great. Anyway, so all right, so I have the strings on. Everything's pretty well polished. I still have a lot of excess on the strings, and I'm not going to touch those yet. But what I am going to do is I'm going to start tuning. So it's really low, which is good, because again, we wanted to come up gradually. So, all right. So this is a bit of a process. So every string that I'm tuning, I'm gonna get right up to like where it's supposed to be, and I'm gonna stop. Because what's gonna happen is, as I tune the higher strings, everything kind of relaxes a little bit as more tension comes on. Nothing to be alarmed about. That is normal. So as the strings get a little bit tightened, they'll kind of settle in and pull a little on the bridge pins. So, as I may have mentioned, I like to put as little pressure as possible when installing the bridge pins, because I quite like my bridge to not be cracked. This one is super loose. I do not use any product in the nut. The reason being, since I use a standard tuning and I use light gauge strings, they move pretty well. Like, so one of the other things about using like lower tunings is, if you're using lower tunings, most people tend to run heavier gauge strings, which means the little grooves in the nut tend to be too tight, so you won't get to tune them properly unless you take a file to it and bore that out just a little. But I guess another thing that attracts me to standard tuning is I used to be a much more, well, I don't consider myself avid at all anymore, but I used to be a motorcyclist and rode a lot. And I realized really quickly, like, I'm never gonna be a mechanic in like the truest sense, but I can swap parts. And if you want an easy time swapping parts, keep everything stock, because everything comes from the factory with the right specs, and you don't have to worry about it. And that's also true with guitars and like string gauges. So here we are, getting close to like the first pass of standard tuning with new strings, which is not going to last. Yeah, I'm already like a half step down from where I want to be. Well, you know, I hear you, Carlos. I've actually been a terrible motorcycle parent, and I haven't ridden my bike in over a year. It's probably close to 2 years. And I can put a vague bit of blame on my landlord, because I use a garage on the property that is mostly his wood shop. He inadvertently unplugged my battery tender, which is like a trickle charger that even through the winter or summer will keep the battery happy. Alright. So now I'm basically tuned. Anyway, the trickle charger being off and me not paying much attention to the bike, I didn't catch it for weeks, and by the time I did, the battery was shot. So the plus side of all that is I did put marine stabilizer in the gas tank before I stopped riding, so I don't probably have to worry about my gas tank being annihilated with bad fuel or my gas lines or carburetors being in bad shape. But so now I'm cutting off the excess strings, and I'm trying to do that as close as I can to the head of the machine head, because the strings are fairly sharp, and there's no reason to risk cutting yourself when you're tuning up your guitar. Plus, I think it looks cleaner. So, all right. So now I've got a guitar with shiny new strings, and the other nice thing about newer strings is like they're softer, they're more pliable, and I like that a lot, because otherwise you end up using a lot more pressure to hold down chords or single notes. They don't bend as well, and the guitar doesn't stay in tune as well as it would with like fresher strings. So now that I'm all set up again, my guitar will hold tune for a lot longer. It'll be a lot more fun to play. It looks nicer. Most people probably won't notice if my strings are tarnished or not, like if I'm on a live stream or on stage, but I definitely notice it. So, yeah. All right. Well, I guess I'll probably have to listen to that song at least once or twice now, Carlos. Thank you. So, for those of you who are just tuning in, Carlos has suggested, well, I'll just add it to the broadcast. That'll make life a lot easier. Then we're all savvy. So, anyway, let's move that over so we get the whole thing. Yeah. So, now I'm all tuned up and I'm ready to go. So, I'm going to put the information for Sterling Ren Fair up. If you are anywhere near Oswego, New York this weekend, do come and hang out. This is the second to last weekend for Sterling Renaissance Festival, and I will be on the Merchant Bend stage with Volgamut in the afternoon for 2 shows. So you will probably recognize some of the songs. I'm hoping that Michael records some of this weekend, but who knows? It could get lost in the shuffle. I know festival days tend to be a little bit hectic, especially since they've got 4 regular shows and then 2 parades. So the parade in and the midday parade. So who knows? I might get roped into that too. And honestly, I wouldn't mind. It's actually a really fun experience. So thanks for hanging out, everybody. I think I'm probably going to be signing off in a couple of minutes. But I will be back Monday night for our usual time at the Wandering Bard. That'll be 8 p.m. Eastern. I'm planning on leaving Oswego, New York by like early afternoon at the very latest, so I can at least get home and hang out a little bit and decompress from the drive. But, you know, you never know how things work out. Last time I went up there, my last day was also a Monday. I still made it home in time for the show, but we were pretty busy in the morning with some stuff that happened that was unintended. So we had some adventures. Yeah. Oh, cool. Thanks for posting that video. I'll check that out, Carlos. You have a nice weekend too. All of you have a nice weekend. Anyway, thanks so much for tuning in. I'll if I don't see you before then, I'll see you Monday night at 8 p.m. Eastern for Live from the Wandering Bard. And anyway, love you all. See you soon. Let's do one of these.